Okay, and welcome back to another episode of A Dose of Reality. Greetings to all. Greetings to all. How are we feeling, Amakhu?
We're feeling good. We're feeling good. I can't say too much more than that. We're feeling good.
I'm trying to get the energy up because we're tired this week.
We are. It's been a tiring week.
We've been doing a lot.
It's been a busy week and the weather isn't great. Yeah, which is it ever, to be honest? Or is it ever for long here in the UK? But we're good. We had
a full-on storm the other day.
We did. Was it yesterday or the day before? Yeah.
Well, I don't know, when we was on the road driving back.
Yeah.
We could see the flashes. That was wild.
Yeah, it was. Something was going on in the heavens. Somebody was warring. That wasn't lightning. We'll get on to that.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, something was going on.
But, I mean, what I wanted to talk about today, well, I've been seeing a lot happening in the conscious community,
right,
for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me thinking about the conscious community in general, but it reignited a conversation we'd had a while back in my head about what we call conscious versus culture, the idea of that.
Yeah.
And I started pondering on the reason why I choose to be a Sabaean and all of that. So I thought this would be a good discussion to bring to the podcast.
Fair enough.
So let's get into it.
Let's dive all the way in.
I mean, the first angle I would come at it from, well, these days it's hard to define what the conscious community exactly is. Who is within that branch?
Yeah. I mean, if you search it up, you find there's various sectors of it, various different groups who would claim to be a part of what you would call the conscious community. So that's why it's quite difficult to define. You might have Kemetic science, you might have Nation of Islam, you might have this, you might have that. All these different various conscious groups who make up what you would determine as the conscious community.
Yeah, pretty much. So. I know for us growing up, and even before that, it was an idea of people who, I mean, to be conscious itself means to be like, have knowledge of something or be aware of one's surroundings.
Right.
But I know for us, it was, Black people who were aware that we've been oppressed in this day and time and want to come together for a solution, want to find out where we came from. So there used to be a lot of events that we used to go to in and around that, just kind of Black people coming together. And I think the conscious community has had its different manifestations over the decades, different teachers, many of them great teachers. But I think the element of culture is important to discuss. So that's why I want to bring in this topic, because I think it is consciousness is very important. I think it's important. It's almost a process of becoming aware. Well, who am I? Look, I would say consciousness is part of the journey, but it's not the destination.
Right.
Is what I would put it as. So you're only going to go so far within that arena. Which is what I think.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I think it's a case of, it's like you say, it's defining what consciousness is, isn't it? Because a key part, if consciousness is information, awareness and information of self, outformation as we like to say, then one of the key parts of that information or outformation should be the knowledge that if you don't have an identity as a people, if you don't have a culture as a people, if you don't have a way of life, then you really don't have much. So that should be one of the first things you learn, or one of the crucial things you learn when you become conscious. So if we remember that idea of consciousness, certainly from our perspective as Sabaeans, was to the acknowledgement that we've been mentally enslaved. And thus we are effectively just under control of whoever was, subjected us to that mental slavery, if that makes sense. And so that was the idea. Okay, so African people, we've been mentally enslaved through different methods, but primarily through the lights of religion, through the lack of understanding of self, from the lack of understanding of our story, how long we've been on the planet, where we come from, the greatness we come from. So we've been subjected to a period of time whereby our memory, our knowledge, our records only go back at most to the 6,000 years that you would take back for the Europeans, where our history or our story goes back way further. And so we've been subjected to that, and we had a real lack of understanding of who we are. and thus the consciousness movement was necessary.
Yeah, it was like asking the question.
Yeah.
Once you start to become conscious of what's going on around you, you start asking questions. I think questions lead you down a path, and the ultimate destination is to realize, well, all of this is void without culture. Culture being what we were doing before.
Exactly.
Our identity, our traditions.
Exactly.
So that's why I think there's only a certain amount of growth you're going to find being in the quote unquote conscious community. Because what is it really? I mean, what is its and go?
Yeah, well, exactly that.
It's not easily definable.
No, it's not easily definable, and therefore the destination is not easily defined. And like I say, if you go and, I don't know, search about the conscious community, you're going to find various different groups within the community. And all of them are going to have useful points. All of them are probably going to have things you agree with and things you disagree with. But the point is that, okay, if there's no overall destination, no overall goal for your people or for the people in that group, then where are you going? And so that's why the conscious community, by large, eventually is always going to become, I don't want to say void, but it's going to become something that doesn't necessarily offer you a destination. It might still to this day offer someone a start.
Yeah, I think it has.
They learn something about something and they're like, okay, yeah, all right. And that sets them on a path. But you have the danger of becoming trapped in just a void of information, or void of different people citing different things. And did you know what this really means? And you know what that really says?
Exactly that. I was going to get onto.
Yeah.
Because one thing I like to say is I got love for the conscious community. I think growing up, we went to a lot of different events that brought us. We met some good people within the conscious community, some intelligent people. We also met some clowns. But
they was around.
You meet those type of people in any walk of life.
Yes.
The clowns, the exploiters, the bums.
Of course.
You'll meet them anywhere. That's not unique to the conscious community. But what occurred to me, I think in recent years, I went to a conscious event just to see what was going on. And I saw the same people I'd seen like 10 years ago saying the same stuff.
Yeah.
So then I was like, this hasn't really moved. And it even made me reflect within myself. Even as Sabaeans, we don't claim to have it all figured out. We're still in the process of growth and undoing what has been done to us. So I think Black people in general have to make sure we're not stuck in a loop of saying, well, we need to liberate ourselves, but not actually doing anything to liberate ourselves. So the reason I think culture is so important, specifically me being in the Sabaean culture, is as Sabaeans, we've been given the tools to liberate ourselves. And we've seen that through things that have been done. When I used to work in the temple, the bookstore, there was this guy that used to come in. He was more so a floater between information. He just liked watching a lot of different videos, different teachers. But he used to like to come in and build with us and, get the latest information. So them types that just after information.
Yeah. They like the information and okay, so what's new?
What's new? He used to come in.
What you got for me?
What you got?
Yeah.
So we used to talk to him. But I remember one time he did say, one thing I say about York's teacher, he was like, the one thing I say about Dr. York is he did all the things all the other teachers only talked about doing. He actually did them. He set up a line that had the people heading towards living for of and by each other. All others only spoke about doing that. Which is what I want to get into, even when we talk about teachers of the conscious community. I'm sick and tired of them being compared to Baba.
You're trying to call people out.
I'm just saying it.
Name names. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Don't name names.
I'm about to. No, I'm joking. I'm just saying. It's not a conversation. Show me their rap sheet of what they've achieved if we're even putting them in the same conversation as Baba Yanun.
Right.
So I'm sick and tired of that.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I think what happens is that you have to deal with conversations on different levels. So when you approach people who aren't Sabaeans, they'll have their own view on different teachers, and they'll see people as teachers. And we here as Sabaeans, and with the certain information we've been exposed to, is that obviously we see Baba Yanun as a master teacher, but we go beyond that with the information that we've been given. And so this is why, and we said this some time ago, we really need to do, and the books are out there already, but we really need to do an episode on the being. So you have Malachi York, you have Yanun, Yananan, and we really need to do an episode on the being, because it's to recognize who he is as a being. And like I said, we're teachers, we're not preachers, so we'll give the information out, have an understanding of who the being is, and we'll tell you who he is, and then it's up to you whether you deal with everything we've laid out or not. Some people turn away from it, some people learn it and go on and absorb it. But the comparison is almost unfair in that sense, because you're dealing with someone who's been sent by Parnataru to elevate the minds of his people. That's literally his job. It's not to say that others won't be sent to do sectors of work.
To do what they need to do.
And there are many, many different spirits and spiritual happenings and things that are going on. But when you're talking about the warner, the restorer, the renewer of our story, that's a being that only comes every 24,000 years. And that's what we have here. And we can point to various, sects of proof and sects of evidence as to that fact. Not only his achievements, but some of the information that he's been able to give us, some of the predictions that he's been able to give us, some of the breakdowns that he's been able to give us that come from him. So what people in the conscious community will have to acknowledge is that there is a lot of information that's just floating around out there now. Even when you're talking about Anunnaki, Pleiadians or Palladians, extraterrestrial, so on and so forth, consciousness, the science of Kemet, so on and so forth. There's a lot of that originally came from our teacher. And now it's just floating around, and people who are new to the community won't necessarily know where it originally came from. And like I said, I might have said this on the last episode or the episode before that, you have plenty of people who slander Baba Yanan and then teach his knowledge a second later. Slander, teach, slander, teach, slander, teach. And so it really can't be denied when you trace it back, and you trace back what he was originally saying, whether you're talking about in the early 70s, even late 60s, where he explained, and this is part of the reason why you have this conscious movement, isn't it? He explained, when I first came, I tried to teach you what I'm teaching right now. Attrifats Partalak, hereafter doctrine, the knowledge of who we really are. Things that you wouldn't have heard spoken of before, whether it's Anunnaki, but even beyond that, Riskians, planet Murazak or planet Risk, why we came to this planet, why we were seeded on this planet, our creation, so on and so forth. The story of Maldek, and so on and so forth, the story of the dolphins and what role they played in our seeding as a people. Afafre Akar, the story of the Sands people. So much knowledge of our history. He said, okay, I tried to kind of deliver that to you, but you all weren't trying to hear it. Everyone was asking me about Jesus. Everyone was asking me about Muhammad, and so on and so forth. So I had to walk you through the schools. So I had to make sure, okay, let me give them that while slowly elevating their minds, okay? So dealing with a lot of the misconceptions of the stories anyway, of the religions that don't apply to us, but still in the version that you've been given isn't even the correct version. So let me at least correct it, walk you through the schools, elevate your mind until we reach a level where we're at now. And so whilst he was doing that, a lot of things were touched upon, which gave a lot of information and information for teachers, some genuine, some not, for them to go and use to start their own movements and start their own process. And so there's just various things floating around. So the comparison by that sector is unfair. So, I mentioned as well in the last episode, we want to get into the Warner, anti-Warner doctrine. And that's one of the reasons that I want to get into it, because people need to understand not only what we're saying he is as a teacher and the various books that he's written, endless, so many different titles, various sects of information, so on and so forth, but who he is as a being. And that's where you step into a world that becomes foreign to certain mindsets, because they want to stay in the sort of the conscious but physical sort of, I just need to know who I am, and the errors in religion. And when we step into Parnatalu, when we step into spiritual sciences, when we step into what our overseers or what our gods do for us, and what the connection is based on, and what language we need to speak to connect with them, and how they try and help us, the methods that they go about it. One of those methods being sending a being like Yanun to elevate his people, and how it works, and how the timing of things has to be right. While we've gone through such a traumatic period, it's all about timings. The earth, the solar system, the galaxy, the universe goes through different ages. There's going to be certain ages where evil, for a lack of a better term, rules. And that's what we've dealt with in this last age.
Yeah, exactly that. It's all getting into the spiritual aspects.
Which you have to touch upon.
Which you have to touch upon, because where the what I've noticed, I feel like the conscious community peaked a while back. And then what we're seeing is certain people can get in and sort of, it's peaked, what I would say is peaked, been corrupted, and then we're seeing a regression where it sort of goes through a cycle of, oh, who's the latest teacher?
Right.
It's all very, it promotes what I call information junkies, just people jumping from teacher to teacher to get the latest information, never really applying it. Because what good is knowledge if you're not applying it?
Right?
So even going to that event made me look at it like, even as Sabaeans, I don't want to be in a place where we're citing past things we've done as, okay, well, we achieved that. It's like, well, what are you doing now? Because if you're not evolving, you're not alive.
Yeah, exactly.
So don't get me wrong, Tamaray was a big feat. And that's something even everyone outside of the culture cites as, oh, well, no one achieved that to that level in the West, especially. So, but it's important not to peak and then go backwards.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And that's something that we have to all look at ourselves and say, well,
every single person has to look at
what
themselves.
We doing? What we got coming?
Because we got the tools. We know we got the tools.
What are we building? What are we doing? And you're exactly correct. So that's to everyone to look at it. And I think that's an important part of the conversation as well, because the reality of it is not everyone's going to be a Sabaean. Not everyone's going to be in this nation. Not everyone's going to be in that group. That's the reality of it. So the point of meeting has to be a point where we all acknowledge that whatever errors we see, we have to look within first and say, well, what am I doing? What are we doing before we start pointing outwards and saying, yeah, but you guys this, that, and that. So yeah, we most definitely have to look at it and say, okay, what's coming next? What are we building? What are we actually doing with the information we've been given? You know, we have a book called A Nation of Our Own, where Baba Yanun explains it. So yeah, this is what you have to do.
Yeah,
we have to create a literal nation of our own.
Exactly that. So it's all been laid out, which is why I think we know certainly the potential is there. My main point in this, I will talk about the reasons I'm a Sabaean and why I feel it's best here. Best to be here for myself. The main point I would push is culture. You need a sense of culture no matter what way of life you practice.
Exactly that.
Because culture is legacy.
It is. 100
or 1,000 years from now, when they ask our descendants, well, what did your ancestors practice? We don't want them to say, well, they was conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Like what were their traditions, practices?
Right.
They were just aware, of we've been wronged and we need to get back to our original way of life.
Right.
So what is that original way of life? I don't know.
Oh, no, I'm not sure.
What language you speak? English, but they knew it was the colonizers' language. Yeah. They was aware.
No, it's exactly correct, and you're exactly right. And I think that's one of the, if you like, results of the very poor condition we've been in. That we had to have the period of consciousness where we had to really elevate ourselves to what is a normal level. So we look at consciousness as something special, but being aware of yourself, being aware of who you are and where you come from, is nothing particularly special. It's just that's where you should be. And you have various people around the planet who are very aware of who they are. And, and we just weren't. we just weren't. We were mentally asleep. We were mentally asleep, and we were in such a poor condition that journey of consciousness seems like something amazing to us. And in some ways it is. There's certain information breakdowns that are always going to sound incredible to certain people. And to me included, I've read certain books, I've been like, wow, that's deep. So we all have those moments, but the idea of knowing yourself shouldn't be such an amazing thing. It's once you know yourself, you're able to do for self. And that's why you're trying to get to that point that you know yourself. So that's exactly what you're saying in terms of consciousness being part of the journey, but not the destination. And the culture is very important. Your identity, your language, the way you behave, your dance, your food, your dress, the crowns you wear, everything that pertains to your identity fuels your legacy as a people. And so as a people, you'll leave something for your children, who will leave something for their children, and that continues. And that's based on culture, not based on just awareness of the information.
Exactly that. So I think you won't find a great people or a great society where a culture wasn't at the heart of it. When we look around the world, even, you know, not far from us, there's Muslims, they own certain food shops there, and then there's a mosque right there. So they just walk straight across to the mosque. It's all at the heart. It's at the heart of spirituality, economics, and so on and so forth. So
they have an identity. And one thing I would say as well, just in addition to that, is that you're in danger, because the whole point originally of the consciousness community, if you speak to a lot of conscious people, they'll speak about how they don't like religion and they detest religion. But what happens is that you find yourself doing the exact same thing. One of the aspects of religion that they have you trapped in is the idea that you just go to church on a Sunday and you don't do much else. You don't do much for your people. You don't do much for your family, and so on and forth, your society. But you go to church, you pray to this God, then you go home. And next week you do the same thing. And before you know it, you've been going to church for 20, 30, 40 years. Not doing much, but praying, if that makes sense. And what you can find with consciousness and you doing it is that same thing. So when you point out the fact that you went to the event 10 years after you went to the last one, and they were talking about the exact same thing that they were talking about 10 years ago, that's the same thing, believe it or not. You may have think yourself higher, because I'm dealing with this information, that information. But if you're just going every week to an event, saying some things, and then going home and living your life, and you're not doing anything, then you are in effect the same as those people that you would look across and say, oh, well, look at them.
Exactly. That's a really important point, because we speak about that a lot, the idea of religion being a mentality more than actually a thing itself. Exactly. You can have you could be out of religion and still have a religious mentality, which is just stuck in a routine of never growing.
Exactly that. A religious mentality is thriving in the people, and people you have to understand the religious mentality in order to fully get out of it. And one of the things you have to understand is that it's very, very difficult to get out of. No matter how conscious you think you are, how much knowledge you think you have, the religious mentality is very, very difficult to get rid of all aspects of it. And one of the main things that we see in religion, obviously, is this idea of waiting for Jesus, for lack of a better term. And I've seen it throughout in so many people. I'll admit that there's been times in my journey when I've been guilty of it. Just replace Jesus with whatever you want to replace it with. But you're idle, waiting for something. Oh, no, this is going to be put right. And there's only one person who can put it right. It's you. But we get in the comfortability of saying, no, I'm going to wait for this. I'm going to wait for that. And there's so many different stages of that particular test, of the whole waiting for Jesus, or waiting for the Savior, or waiting for something to happen, or waiting for this, or waiting for that. The religious mentality is a very difficult thing to get rid of. And so many people have it. It's very easy to elevate yourself to a certain point where you think you're conscious, and then get stuck in a loop again where you're not doing much. You've got to a certain place and you've stopped. These things are very easy to happen.
Very easy to happen. Not only get stuck in a loop, but go backwards.
Yeah, indeed.
So you really have to recognize the signs of that, which is pertinent in this day and time, because even the other day, I can't remember which episode it was, we were talking about how the dimensional shift has happened and the separation has happened. People are either progressing or regressing.
Right.
So, to be honest, in this day and time, if you're talking about unconscious, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, don't know what that means.
That's been hijacked anyway, as wokeness.
It has.
We've seen it corrupted in certain senses, where, you know, certain teachers come in, look heavy, but they're really just scammers, whatnot, looking to benefit themselves. So, yeah, I can only say we need a sense of culture in this day and time. Yeah. The conscious period had its time, and it was very important for basically to mentally wake us up.
Right.
You know, as Babbas have actually referred to us in the past as mummies. We needed to be woken up.
It was definitely mummies.
We was definitely sleep in that bed.
Yeah, we was comfortable asleep. The alarm clock wasn't working. We needed something stronger. And that's an actual fact.
That's an actual fact. So I can only emphasize, if you're not evolving, you're not alive. So
if you're not moving, if you're not growing, if there's no movement, if you're in any way stagnant, anything that doesn't move is dead. And that's the thing to understand. Our culture, we're always getting something new. It's always changing. We're always growing. And it's important to maintain those aspects. But yeah, like I said, it's so easy. It's so easy to get trapped in a place where you're not growing and you're not moving. But culture, yeah, it's crucial. Your identity is crucial. And like we've said before, it's one of the reasons that they stripped it from us. They didn't just stop us from learning. The first thing they did was strip us of our titles, of our names, of our language, of our culture, of our way of life, because they understood that this existence is more than physical. And if I strip them of these things, if I strip them of their identity, that doesn't just affect their physical, that affects their spiritual, that affects their mental, and your mental controls everything. As we know, if you are mentally broken, you are broken. I don't need to do anything to you physically if I can mentally break you. It's like that image that they have of the, I think it might be an elephant tied to a chair, and the chair's light. It could move if it wanted to, but it doesn't move, right? Because the visualization of being tied to the chair, it's trapped. And that's what you have with our people. We've been genetically, we've been put through genetic trauma whereby we are mentally trapped. So we stay on a certain vibration or in a certain way of life, even though we can just get up and leave. But we can't visualize that. So we just stay. So no, I have to go to church. I have to do this. I have to do that, because that's just the way it has to be. And that can apply even outside religion, just to our general everyday life, where we are a part of several systems that would collapse without us. And that goes for religion. One thing Baba Yanon explained, he said, you give the soul to religion. You give it life. That's why they want you there. And you know it. We know that.
We know Black Church is
Black
unmatched.
Church has got that life. Yeah. Everyone's on 100. They're doing their thing. You go to white church. I've seen a couple of representations of white church. Doesn't seem as exciting to me. So, we know we give it that life, we give it that soul. That's one of the reasons they want us there. And that applies even outside religion. And so that's the key. It's the key. When we say culture, when we say identity, and we spoke about, the story of Nimrod, we spoke about language. One of the main reasons that I want to get people to understand is that there's a reason why. We don't just go back to our original names and tones just to look heavy. We don't just learn our original language just to look heavy. We don't just have our dance, our dress, our attire, our food, so on and so forth, just to look heavy. We don't just build the things that we build, whether it's our temples and so on and so forth, constructions, these are all a part of our identity. And your identity is how you are recognized, not just throughout the planet. Remember, you want to be in a position where you're respected by others on the planet. One of the key reasons that Africans worldwide aren't respected is we have no real identity. Africans in the West, we don't have an identity. We're not respected. It was stripped from us, granted, but we don't have an identity, so we're not respected. We don't have a power base, so we're not respected. Do you think the American police will start shooting Chinese people in the streets? How long before China's country says, well, what are you doing killing our people over there? There's no power base. They'll react, so they won't do that. But we don't have that connection with each other. And so the reason that we point to language and we point to, identity, so on and so forth, is not just so that we're recognized worldwide on the physical and respected. It's also so that we're recognized spiritually. And when we're dealing with our ancestors, when we're dealing with our gods, if you want to use that term, our overseers, our watchers, our angels, whatever term you want to use, they are looking at vibration. And your vibration is determined by your behavior, which is determined by your culture. So if you behave as an African, as the first world people, our ancestors will recognize us as the first world people. Exactly. And as we shift into this new time, you mentioned the dimensional shift. And I feel like we've probably broken down the dimensional shift before. But just to make sure people know what we're speaking about, very briefly, we have the planet shifting from one dimension into another. And every time a shift like this takes place, you have beings that manifest and beings that cease to exist, so to speak, beings that fade away, if that makes sense, because not every being makes a dimensional shift. So this happens with us as humanoids, and this happens even with the animals, so on and so forth. So if you do some research in it, you'll see there's certain animals showing up right now that they haven't seen for ages, that they thought were extinct, right? Things are happening. One thing that Bubba pointed out is that when you had the cigarette-shaped craft, which we can point we could put a link to it. You know, I forgot exactly what it was called, but they spotted a craft near Earth. What they might have said was a rock or some sort of meteor, whatever they would have called it. Baba explained that was a craft, and one of the things it dropped off was spores for the next age of existence. So we're going to start to see I saw a picture the other day, random creatures and animals.
Yeah, I've seen a few
showing up that people either haven't seen before or haven't seen for a long time.
I saw a bird that hadn't been
there
seen
you go
in a long time.
There you go. So the dimensional shift, when you're dealing with dimensions is really about the pulsation. Not to get too deep into the science, because that's not the point, but dimensions are really about the pulsation rate of the atoms. So at every atom pulses, and if that pulsation rate increases, we shift dimensions. So what's happening is that the planet is shifting, whether we like it or not. And so everything has to shift with it. And if you don't shift with it, you will regress and eventually fade. And so as to your point, Baba said, yeah, look around. The dimensional shift is happening. So look around at who's regressing and look around at who's progressing. And you'll be able to see who has made the shift, if that makes sense. So it's important to point that out. But as we shift into this new age, it's a very significant time. And it's a time period whereby the evil's reign or the evil's rule of this last 6,000 years, it's up. It's over. So our ancestors are around right now, looking. Okay.
Like, what you about to do?
Yeah. Where you at? Where's our children at?
Yeah.
Okay. They're looking for us. And yeah, if we're not behaving as they left us, or as we should be, or as is correct to our vibration, then it's very difficult to save us from what's to come, if that makes sense. And so vibration, culture, identity, it's all very important. It's all very crucial.
It's all very important. And that's the reason I choose to be a Sabian. I'm not sure I actually answered that, because I've never come across teachings like this and being given a sense of culture. All other teachers, some things, sounded heavy. Some teachers I don't like. I don't see what.
I know. You've made that clear.
Yeah.
Name names. Name. No, I'm joking. Don't name names.
I've named names to you, but I ain't about to come for them on here.
Yeah, we're not taking shots.
Teachers, I genuinely don't get it. I'm like, that person?
Well, this is what I said. This is what I said last episode. I said some of these teachers pop out of nowhere. Like there's a field where they're growing them. But when they arrive, I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
This is the one?
This is the one you're going to follow to the end?
And they got a following, so I don't know, man.
So like, okay. But I've never come across a teacher like Baba. But it's beyond that. I've never come across a culture like this, where someone's given us a way to dress, a language, land, and so much more, a way to live for, of, and by each other, and, build up ourselves economically. I don't really see people pushing that as much as Baba has.
Right.
So, and just the spiritual aspect. I mean, we even spoke about some spiritual experiences we've had recently in the episode we did for Nefrutat. I've never felt like this spiritually. So really it's what resonates with me. I've always been interested in culture. I've even admired others' cultures and wanted a sense of having culture and identity. Because culture is identity.
Right.
And culture is legacy.
Right.
So,
an actual fact.
I think it's very important to have. It's what we were passed down from generation to generation. Something to pass down from generation to generation. I don't really see, at these conscious events, to be honest, I do see a lot of adults, and I'm not sure it's clear in the minds of people that, okay, the children of the future, so what are we actually doing to liberate the children and give them a sense of identity?
Right.
In what are we building for them to inherit?
And
I just see that period. I even, I've had these conversations within my own tribe, like, okay, we can't get, and I do want to have a conversation about the generational differences, because I think it's an important one to address.
Right.
So we'll do an episode on that. But we can't fall into this trap of gatekeeping knowledge because we want certain seats or to be idolized.
Right.
You have to impart what you know onto the future generations, or where are we heading as a people?
That is an actual fact. That's an actual fact.
That is an actual fact. So knowledge, if you have a skill I never get when these people have a skill and they don't teach their descendants or their children it. Like, once you transition, that skill's going to leave with you, and that knowledge is going to leave with you. So I don't know what you're gatekeeping.
Yeah, but it's exactly correct what you're saying. It's the mentality of wanting to be idolized. It's the mentality of wanting to look heavy, and our ancestors have spoken on this exactly. So you have a situation where you have My Journey, which was an update Baba Yanun gave, where he was taken up onto the ship quite some years ago. This was early 2000s. He was in prison at the time, if I'm correct, and he was taken up on the ship. There's a blackout. Search it. Blackout. 2003 was it? 2004 something. Yeah. I just didn't want to say a date. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've read the story, but there was a blackout. You can Google search a blackout in New York around that timeline. You see there was a big blackout in New York. All the power went, and what was explained is that Baba Yanun was taken up onto the crafts, and they asked him certain questions, and the fundamental question was, are they ready? Obviously, the answer was no, and this is pertaining to us as Sabaeans or our tribe, and beyond that, obviously, and all of our people worldwide. And it was, do they know how to sing? And what that question meant was, do they know their language? Exactly. Do they know their tones? Are they speaking on the correct frequency? And the answer was no. And the reason was they're too busy trying to look heavy. And that's trying to impress each other. And that's what happens. You get information, and you get the ability to be elevated in some way above others, whether it's a seat, whether it's just the fact that you're knowledgeable, whether you're the main guy, whatever it is. And you would rather have that and hold on to that than actually pursue what is needed for our identity as a people, which is, okay, well, are they singing? Are they speaking our tones? Are they chanting? So on and so forth. These are the things that align us. And as a people, and as this is a natural fact, you chant together for long enough, everything comes in sync.
Yeah,
your heartbeat
they've
comes in sync.
Experiments.
Yeah, they've conducted experiments.
Sing together, their heart rates sync up.
Synchronize. Yeah. So if you want to align yourself, these are the real and scientific aspects, because sometimes we talk about chanting, which is often related to praying and things like that, and it can become mystical, like, what's that, especially from a religious sense. But the unique thing about the position we have as Sabaeans is that all the science is broken down. It's not just chant. It's, okay, chant, but this is how you do it, and this is why you do it. Exactly. And this is the way it works. So you chant in these tones because that's the frequency of nature, or this the frequency of that. We're given all the sciences to back up our practices, if that makes sense. And so it was the key question. It was like, okay, well, why don't they know how to sing? It's like, nah, man, they're too busy trying to impress each other, because the outformation, which is necessary, that's what they're pulled towards. And why? Because they know, if I have outformation, if I have some heavy sounding knowledge, I'm going to be that guy to whoever. I'm going to be in that seat. I'm going to have that amount of power. And that's what we wanted, more than we wanted to just have an identity as a people. Because when you're talking about chanting, learning your language, that's helping you as a people. When you're talking about reading that book and breaking down how the atoms dissect into this and that and all that, then now that's helping you. Because now you can go on stage and, listen, man, I know about the atoms, isn't it?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
The level of ego stroking we've witnessed over the years
has been too much. Too much. And so, yeah, definitely, different aspects. The genders might work in slightly different ways. I know as a male, you're going to have situations where you're up there teaching. You might see a woman in the crowd. You're like, I'm going to be on my game today. What do I know? Let me break down quarks. Yeah, spiritual sciences. Yeah. And suddenly you're rapping up there. And it's all good. It's all good. We're teachers. That's one of our primary jobs as Sabaeans, is to teach. But you can tell if someone has been overcome by that egotistical side by watching them long term, and say, okay, you're teaching. Are you doing anything else? Are you helping your people in this way? Are you learning your language? Are you chanting? And those are the spiritual aspects that we have to be aware of and that we were given. And so that was a key message all the way back then for us as a people. Oh, you guys don't know how to sing. You don't know your tones, your chants. You don't know how to contact the beings that can help you. You're not interested in contacting the beings that can help you. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Then you're no better than everyone else, or than the evil of this reign that is going to be extinguished. And this is what we said. We've said it. We spoke about, I'm not sure if we put that episode out yet, but we spoke about the fact that the West is going to fade, and it's just really who fades with them. This is the idea. The evil, for lack of a better term, of this recent age will fade. That's set because that's nature. We have to decide if we're going to fade with it. And that has been the key. And we keep getting chances as a people to behave better, to act right, to care for each other. It's not doubting that it's difficult. One of the difficulties in it is that we have so much in our genetics that wouldn't have been there at the beginning. So you literally have an internal war going on. You're battling with yourself. Like, do I want to act right? Nah. Okay, today I'll act right. Oh, nah. And you have to make a decision every day to do your best. And we all make mistakes, but
that
overall.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
That reminds me of one of your lyrics. Sorry, it just popped into my head.
Which one?
Where you said fighting for and against my own has become the same thing.
Yeah, check it out. It's on I gotta plug it. It's on YouTube, Walker Crew. Which one is that? That is, I can feel it inside, right? That was Reptu's rap.
Yeah.
Right.
I can feel it.
Yeah, I can feel it.
But that line just always stood out to me. Fighting for and against my own has become the same thing.
Yeah, and that was the reality of it. And Baba felt the highest impact of that line. And that was really just the understanding that on this journey, because of the way that we've been corrupted and traumatized and infiltrated, and when I say infiltrated, I don't just mean our groups have been infiltrated, which is actually another topic I want to get onto it. The fact that every black group is infiltrated at some point, whether you go back to the times of Marcus Garvey, when you're doing, or whether you're dealing with right now. That's what they do. That's what the European, shall we say, does. They infiltrate. So whether you're talking about being infiltrated in that manner, or your genes being infiltrated, as far as what we dealt with during bondage times, whether it's all the rape and so on and so forth, what it's meant is that, and the presence of black devils as well. What it's meant is
devils, whether we talk about plants,
all of it.
Even we see it across history, Black Panthers, even.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole Jesus and Judas story, isn't it? It's just there's always infiltration, and that's usually how something falls, if that makes sense. But what it meant is that if you decide to take up a mission where you want to help your people, you are going to have to fight your people to do it. The first enemy that you're going to meet in the condition that we're in will be your people. And so I think it was Baba that had an analogy where someone might be hanging off a cliff, right? And they're hanging on to the cliff with one hand and pointing a gun at you with the other. And you have to decide whether to reach down and help them and try and help them. Like, yo, man, don't pull the trigger. I'm trying to help you. And you're reaching down to pull them up and they're ready in that trigger.
Yeah. And I know for me, that has been the hardest thing, like going through this day and time where we're just so out of our own minds. Like, it's hard to trust people even sometimes. And you're like, people can like sabotage things without even from the fact you have people who subconsciously sabotage things, being that, we're so traumatized as a people, or our genes are infiltrated, which is a lot to do with why we speak our language and chant. It's about tuning into the correct genetics, isn't it? The correct frequency.
Awakening the correct being within you.
Because as we said, you can have genealogy or beings within your genes who don't like you. So it's about tuning them out. And when we get into the science of the 30 spirits, which I'm sure we can go into another time. But yeah, so you can have people who can subconsciously sabotage themselves, and then people who are consciously sabotaging things, actual plants. Right. So I'm like, it's a lot we have to go through in this day and time. Right. It's a battle to get our people unified.
It's a huge battle, and that's one thing that we always have to acknowledge. And Baba, to be honest, has told us that. He said, the sad thing about this day and time is that a lot of us will fall or fade, and we have to deal with that. So in trying to unite, you're going to come across difficulties and moments where you're like, damn, is this even worth it? What am I doing here? And Baba, again, he expressed this, and he's obviously the warner. So he goes through it 10 times or more, as much as any individual is going to go through it. It's the fact, my biggest obstacle has been the black devil, for lack of a better term. Where it's like, the people that we pray with, eat with, dine with, dance with, so on and so forth. They're smiling in your face, but in their heart of hearts,
spiritually, they've made a pact
with the devil, and you see it expressed in their behavior. And so you have to accept this. This is one of the difficulties of getting out of the religious mindset, isn't it? There's certain, especially if you're a good-hearted person, there's certain evils you're going to struggle to accept because you can't process them in your own being, right?
Yeah,
like, I couldn't think that way. Nah, they wouldn't go that far.
Yeah.
But look at the state of the world. They've gone that far. This is a reality. So that is one of the key steps. And I mentioned as well, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it's one of the key things I wanted to mention about coming out of the religious mindset. The religious mindset deals with an all God, all loving, all good, all loving, all powerful, omnipresent being. And so it gives you this idea that, oh, everything's fine. Everything's going to be okay despite this and despite that. And stepping out of that mindset, part of that is accepting, evil exists. Duality is a reality of existence. And therefore, if you have good, you have evil. If you have agreeable, you have disagreeable, so on and so forth. If you have love, you have hate. And these are on opposite ends of the spectrum, but in reality, very similar to certain degrees.
In the same place at the same time.
There you go. And so in accepting that, you start to understand that, oh, snap, yeah, that person can do that, or those people can do that. And the difficulty is, even in accepting what's been done to us as Africans, from that perspective, what's been done to us as a race, but other than our own, you also then have to accept that there's people within who are going to do certain things and have done certain things. And that can be a difficult thing to accept when you see it in practice, which is why we deal with culture being that reality. You're living it, because it sometimes is easy to recite information and even absorb information or absorb information. But to see it in practice and to deal with the reality of what's being said. I can say to you, yo, black devils exist. And you'd be like, yeah, I got it. And then go. And to accept that those around you might be those very black devils is going to be a difficult thing. So we have to be awake and aware. We have to be conscious of that fact, of that reality, if that makes sense. And it's difficult to be. I'm not going to lie to you. It's very difficult to continuously acknowledge certain truths based on what you see. And you have to deal with those truths. It's not easy. It's not easy in practice. And we have our own journey. Everyone's going to have their own journey, but we've walked certain paths along. I met some great people. I met some not so great people, and you have to deal with that reality. It just is where it is. And you deal with agreeable and disagreeable, understanding that both are necessary. And sometimes the disagreeables will get things done.
The job done.
We'll get the job done.
Just need to be channeled.
Exactly. So it's a very difficult thing to live with. And it's a very difficult thing to accept consistently. But this is the world we live in. And so we have to deal with that. And yes, you're exactly correct. Coming back to that point, is the culture which is so crucial in dealing with it, because that is everything. That is our identity. That's who we are. And if we don't know who we are, I'm not just talking about telling you, oh yeah, you descend from the first world people. If we don't know who we are in the way we go about life, then we don't have anything really. And so that's crucial. So yeah.
So in conclusion, get yourself some culture.
Get yourself some culture. And that's one of the things. The final point I would make is that I sometimes battle between the difference in someone who's ultra conscious but not doing much and someone who's ultra religious and not doing much. Because sometimes the ultra religious might have certain ways that are valid, if that makes sense, because they're super religious. So they might say, I'm not going to do this until I get married, or I'm going to do this. They might actually have some sort of substance to the way of life, even if they're in the incorrect way of life, so to speak. And so you're conscious, you've got all the information and you're not doing anything. I wouldn't presume that you're better or considered better in the eyes of the ancestors, for lack of a better term, than the ultra religious person, if that makes sense. And sometimes if you're in a state where you really do, I personally am in a position where I think there's so much information and information out there that we should all really be aware that these religions aren't for us. But ultimately, if you're in a religion, but your heart is in the right place, genuine, you're a genuine person, the ancestors, of course, will look kindly upon you, than more so than someone who's out the religion, but they're moving in a way that's devilish. But they got all the information, they know all this and they know all that, but they're moving in a devilish way. They're going to look more kindly upon the person who's in the religion, in the incorrect vibration, but has a genuine heart. Then they'll look upon that. So we always as Sabaeans say, yeah, the ship's going to come one day and take us. And one thing that Baba said is that if you make it onto the ship, you might look around and be surprised who you see. And so I've always been aware, like, okay, you just don't know until the time comes. So that's the point I would make. That's the point I make. That distinction is sometimes difficult. What's the better place to be in? Which just brings us back to the point that if you have the information, act upon it.
Yeah, you have to have a way of life you practice, despite where you are. And I think a lot of people fall into the trap of just absorbing information, but not having a way of life.
Right. Exactly. Really. Not having an identity. Not having a culture.
Exactly that.
Yeah. And we're subject to that. And it's been deliberate. It's been deliberate, the fact that we look at Africans worldwide, we're so, in so many different ways, speak so many different languages, have so many different vibrations, all adding up to a very confused group of people who can't really come together to do what they need to do. And that's by design. This is why I told the story of Nimrod, because that was symbolic of dividing us. The fact that the language was confounded, that story was symbolic of dividing us as a people and making sure we can never align. So we do need to change that. But with that, we accept the reality that not everyone's going to be this just because I'm that. Not everyone's going to be a Sabaean because I'm a Sabaean. But with that being said, this is culture. So there's a reason why we've chosen this path.
It's a reason. And that can we at least come together and agree there's something we need to do. Which is why it's positive lately. We're seeing like the coups and even like the Alabama brawl. It was that sense of, people didn't think, what religion are you? What this and that. They just came and had each other's backs.
Exactly.
With the Alabama brawl. So it could be the beginnings of us at least coming together and acknowledging there's something we need to do. Yeah. Exactly. I'm saying I feel the answer is within culture. We've laid out why we feel that way. But if we can at least agree, begin to agree, there's more. Yeah. There's more to this.
Yeah, exactly. We need each other.
We need each other and we need a future. Yeah. We need to set future generations up to thrive. So, I think it's important, the point you made, never be so arrogant to think just because you have knowledge, you're better than anyone else. Exactly that. Because what are you doing? What are you actually doing with your life?
Exactly that. So it's just a reminder to look at self for everyone. So every so often, let me not just walk so fast past that mirror. Let me stop and just glance, let me reflect a little bit. How am I doing? What am I doing? And yeah, like I said, we're all living a human experience, and humans by definition really aren't perfect. So it's all good. We're all going to make our mistakes. We're all going to have our moments. But yeah, you got to reflect. Certainly before we point fingers, we got to reflect. We got to reflect and make sure that we're doing the best we can individually and extending that to the group, if that makes sense.
So let's get off the topic. The NASA UAP report is out. And I read it. You read it
all, yeah?
Yeah. It's like 36 pages, maybe 30. Yeah, 36 pages.
Interesting number again.
Some of the pages were just literal pictures. I'm like, I was reading it and it took everything in me not to fall asleep. Like when you're in college or university and you got an assignment and you're typing filler words in to meet the word count. That's what it was like. Some stuff started repeating itself.
Yeah.
I was just like, well, but it actually made me go back and look at, I think the second video we put out on our YouTube was it was last year. Was it last year?
Yeah, it probably would have been early last year, maybe.
Yeah, early. Yeah. Some point last year. Yeah. And we were talking about it because they had just announced maybe a few months prior they were working on this report. And we laid the whole thing out. So I'm going to link that video in.
Yeah. Throw a little clip of us saying whatever we said.
Let me insert a clip or something. Yeah. The first one I have here, this is a good one. NASA announces UAP study. Unidentified aerial phenomena, as they like to say now.
I saw that headline.
Yeah.
I saw that headline.
What's your thoughts? They put together a whole team. They're gonna investigate over 9 months. They're gonna release the report in mid-2023, and it's gonna lay the groundwork for future studies.
Oh, is that right?
you really expect us to believe you've never looked into these. It's just now in 2022. You're like,
exactly.
Airspace, safety, we should look into it.
We should look into that. What we do know is that in this day and time, these big organizations, governments, etc., are going to have to start to reveal certain things anyway, because it's going to become obvious and evident, if it isn't already, that extraterrestrials exist. But hopefully we can get there. I wouldn't be relying on any report from NASA, though. I wouldn't be waiting. Let me see.
Get us there.
Let me see what they're going to say. 2023, I'll get my answers. I wouldn't. You have to start to look into it.
But we laid out that I wouldn't be relying on a report from NASA to get us where we need to be alien-wise. So really the report wasn't even reporting on any findings. It was like an outline of what they're going to do going forward to research UAPs. It ultimately concluded at the end that they found no evidence that the current UAP, which UAP is, it used to be unidentified aerial phenomena, but then they changed the meaning to unidentified anomalous phenomena. So that I discovered they did recently, because I was like, why are they jumping? But they've actually changed what it stands for. Right. So they ended with saying they found no evidence that the UAP were of extraterrestrial origin.
Interesting.
But it could be. That's what they were like. Yeah, but it could be.
So basically, they ain't saying nothing.
They ain't saying nothing. They're just talking about, we think AI could help us and we need to gather data. So we need ways to gather data, and it needs to be good data and UAP specific data. Right. So they're just outlining over and over again what they're going to do going forward. Right. Parts were repeating itself. But I'm like, this is a bunch of hoo-ha. This is not saying anything. So that was that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've got that simultaneously almost with the whole Congress meeting. So while David Grush is saying, aliens are here, they're saying, nah, we ain't.
Yeah, we found no evidence. Meanwhile, Grush is saying they have biological matter of aliens. It contradicts.
It contradicts. What are we doing here?
Also, what made me laugh, there was a YouTube comment it's basically like NASA, quoting NASA, like, we have no evidence. Meanwhile, Mexico want to see a dead body.
Yeah, because we've seen that, right?
We've seen apparent alien body. So I'm going to do a whole What's News covering all of that. But
Mexico got alien bodies,
Mexico,
right?
Like, you want to see a body?
We got a body.
Meanwhile, NASA, like, well, we didn't find any evidence.
There's no evidence.
When they gonna stop lying?
I don't know.
When they gonna stop lying?
Honestly, I didn't think. But you, in the back of your mind, you hope and like, okay, maybe this year they'll tell more of the truth. And NASA were just like, nah, we ain't ready to do all that. We ain't found no evidence of this. Whilst David Grush is in Congress saying, yeah, listen, we've got the evidence.
We got the evidence.
And Mexico are like, kapow, we got alien bodies. And yeah, we're going to do What's News on that. But
gaslighting.
Yeah.
The level of gaslighting. They're really going to act like they haven't been known aliens are here. Like, oh, well, we need to research.
We need to look into it.
We need to set up systems so people can support. What made me laugh is they just started patting themselves in the back. They were like, with NASA on board, it would destigmatize, the tabooness around, aliens, because NASA has the public's trust.
Yeah. So there's. Yeah.
I'm like, really?
Yeah, not mine. Not my trust. Not my trust. But yeah, I, like we said back then, we weren't expecting anything significant from them. It's just like, were they going to put anything in there of interest? And it just sounds like they haven't. And they're going forward with this. Yeah, we don't have any evidence, but we're going to continue to look into it type mentality.
They took long to point it out anyway as well. They took over a year.
They released it late. Yeah,
and they were meant to release it mid-2023. So even we were saying, I'm not sure that episode went out, but we was like, where's the report at? It's been past mid-2023. There's ducking and diving. And
it was quiet while all the Congress stuff was happening. There was in the background like, okay, it's nothing to do with us.
But they was mentioning Congress because I think NASA had a meeting in May basically to finalize the report and and stuff. But it wasn't really publicized. It's only in my mind I thought, let me see if the report has come out yet.
Right.
And I Googled it and it had just come out the night before, ironically. So I was like, let me read this. waste of my time, actually.
You wasted.
But I read it so you all didn't have to, for the people.
We appreciate you.
And
And they told you nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
How can you learn more in Congress with David Grush saying, well, I can't go into detail with that, but I'll tell you in a closed setting.
Yeah.
He said more than what NASA said was saying that.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Someone who didn't really tell us anything, but said, listen, behind closed doors, I could tell you, said more than NASA said in the entire report. So this is the realities we're dealing with. But like I've always said, don't rely on any of these bodies. Look into it yourself, do your own research, and hopefully we over the course of our episodes and coming months, we'll give you different points to start that research and look into certain things.
Yeah, but Baba's already given us all the information we need as far as extraterrestrials.
Right.
Other information is out there. He's just certainly not going to get it from NASA. That's what we know.
No, you're not.
Yeah, but that was my off the topic for today. I'm sure What's News will follow because there's been a bit happening UFO alien-wise. So, yes.
We got a few things to cover, right?
Reports. Yeah, we got a lot to cover, actually. So, yeah. Oh, let me give a dose for today.
Oh, you got a dose,
saying.
The dose.
The dose.
We've got to get you an intro. We've got to get you a soundbite to introduce the dose.
The dose.
Yeah, something. We've got to get something.
Just a classic one by Bubba. Only fools duck when the truth is thrown at them.
Right.
I feel like that's a solid one for today.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Only fools duck when the truth is thrown at them.
We'll leave that. We'll leave that there for people to absorb.
Yes. Yes. But I would like to thank you all for listening. Mm-hmm. We made it through. We gathered the energy. We had some precise.
Always got energy for the people.
Always got energy.
Always got energy for the people.
Always got time to give you all a dose.
It's our jobs, right? It's our jobs.
So we'll be seeing you all very soon. If you're not already, subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with episodes. We should be having stuff coming out every week now. We're in this, so subscribe, follow. I'll link all our social medias within the description of wherever you're listening to this. Yes. And I should say we're on Google Podcasts now. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Castbox. All those
we're everywhere.
Podcasts.
We're just everywhere. We're omnipresent, like the Christian God.
We're just everywhere. We are gods now.
Yeah.
So you can. If you prefer audio listening, you can find us on all those podcast platforms. Be sure to follow us there as well. If you like what you hear, leave a review, all of that. And until next time.
Okay.
But for now, farewell, Wadu.
Farewell, Wadu.